That chill, it wasn't just in the air that night. It was in my bones. It had been my constant companion for months. He always knew where I was, and he made sure I knew it. You know that feeling? Being constantly watched, your life shrinking, bit by bit, under someone's obsessive gaze. It's like a silent scream, and it's terrifyingly common. Turns out, something like 80% of stalking victims are tracked using technology. I became one of them. This isn't just a story about running. It's about how I carefully, meticulously planned to vanish from a life that felt more like a cage. It all started, like these things so often do, with a charm that felt like actual sunshine. He was attentive, almost overwhelmingly so. In the beginning, it really did feel like a whirlwind romance, the kind you see in movies. We met through mutual friends, and honestly, he seemed like everything I thought I wanted: confident, caring, and incredibly focused on me. That intensity was flattering, especially after some pretty lukewarm connections I'd had before. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what a passionate relationship feels like. But passion, I learned, can curdle into possession so easily. There's such a fine line between someone being all about you and someone wanting to own you, a line I didn't even see until I was already tripping right over it. Those early days were intoxicating, filled with grand gestures and promises of a future that looked idyllic. Who wouldn't want to feel like the center of someone's universe? The problem is, when you're the only thing in their sky, there's no room for anyone or anything else. The shift was subtle at first, like that quiet change in the air just before a big storm. His attentiveness started to feel heavy. The first real red flag, the one that actually pricked through that bubble of early romance, was the jealousy. And it wasn't the playful kind. It was sharp, accusatory. A casual chat with a male colleague that would lead to an interrogation. Lunch with a girlfriend meant I was obviously hiding something. He'd grill me about who I was texting, why I was taking so long to reply. My explanations were always met with skepticism, this quiet simmer of suspicion that never quite boiled over, but was always there, on the heat. Things also moved incredibly fast. Within weeks, he was talking about us as this permanent thing, a we that felt suffocatingly predetermined. I remember feeling a little breathless, telling myself it was just his way of showing how much he cared. He'd say things like, I just worry about you, or I only get like this because I love you so much. And me, wanting so badly to believe in that sunshine version of him, I'd rationalize it. He's protective. He's just deeply invested. These are the stories we tell ourselves when the truth is just too uncomfortable to look at. His expectations were huge. He needed to be my everything, and in return, he expected to be his. Any time I spent with friends or family started to feel like I was betraying him. He'd make me feel guilty for it, subtly at first, then much more obviously. The world he was building for us, it only had room for two. Then came the more obvious control. It started with my phone. He'd casually pick it up, scrolling through messages while I was in the shower. Then he wanted to know my passwords. Just in case of an emergency, he'd say. An emergency that, funny enough, never seemed to happen but gave him constant access. My social media became a minefield, a picture he didn't like, a comment from an old friend. All of it was fuel for his insecurity and his need to control. His surveillance got more sophisticated and way more chilling. He started coincidentally showing up places he knew I'd be, even if I hadn't breathed a word about my plans. He'd mention conversations I'd had with friends, little details I knew I hadn't shared with him. Then I found it, a tracking app on my phone, hidden deep in the settings. That was a cold, hard shock. The realization that he wasn't just jealous, he was actively monitoring my every move. It was terrifying. It really felt like the walls were physically closing in. He'd ask about my day, and I knew he already had the answers. He was just testing me. The mental gymnastics became exhausting, trying to remember what I'd said, what he might already know, how to act normally when you're constantly under a microscope. The isolation was a slow creep. He'd find reasons to criticize my friends, point out flaws in my family, making it harder and harder for me to see them. He wanted to be my only confidant, my only support system. What that really meant was he wanted to be my only point of reference, my gatekeeper to the outside world. My world just got smaller and darker. The constant anxiety was this tight knot in my stomach. I was jumpy, irritable, and just perpetually exhausted from the mental effort of trying to manage his moods and his suspicions. Sleep wasn't much of an escape either, as nightmares often just replayed my daily fears. I felt like I was losing myself, my independence, my very being, to his suffocating need for control. The fear wasn't just about arguments anymore. It was a deep, primal fear for my safety. The breaking point wasn't some single dramatic explosion. It was more like the very last straw on a camel that was already about to collapse. It was a Tuesday. I'd changed my route home from work, a small act of defiance, a tiny piece of my day I was trying to reclaim. And he was waiting outside my apartment. He shouldn't have known. He just smiled, that possessive smile I'd grown to absolutely dread, and said, "Took you long enough? Traffic bad on Elm Street. I always took Oak Street." That was the moment. The casual, almost smug way he revealed he knew even this tiny, insignificant deviation. It hit me. This wasn't just about jealousy anymore. It was about power, his power over me. In that instant, the fog of confusion and self-doubt I'd been living in just lifted. This wasn't love. This was obsession. This was dangerous. The constant criticism, the explosive temper over the tiniest things, the way he made me feel like I was going crazy, it all slammed together into one single stark realization. I had to get out, not just leave, but disappear. The thought itself was terrifying. How do you truly vanish from someone who has made it their mission to know your every single move? But the alternative, staying, had become completely unthinkable. The fear was still there, that cold pit in my stomach, but now it was mixed with this desperate, rising resolve. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and the thought of his reaction if he found out was paralyzing, but that instinct for survival finally screamed louder than the fear. Planning my disappearance felt like I was scripting a spy movie, except the stakes were my life and my sanity. I knew I couldn't leave a single digital breadcrumb. The first rule, and I repeated this to myself like a mantra, was absolute secrecy and the goal of zero contact once I was out. I started by subtly saving money, tiny amounts siphoned off from grocery budgets, cash back here and there, all hidden in a place I knew he'd never even think to look. I researched online, always using incognito mode in library computers, learning how to leave an abusive situation, how to cover my tracks. I confided in one trusted friend, someone he didn't know well, someone who lived in a different city. She became my lifeline, my logistical rock. We even developed code words for our calls. I slowly started to get rid of my possessions, donating clothes, selling small items for cash, trying to make it all look like a big spring cleaning spree. The hardest part, honestly, was the emotional detachment, acting like everything was perfectly normal, while inside I was just a bundle of nerves and adrenaline. The day I left, I picked a morning when I knew he had an unmissable, all day commitment. My friend was waiting a few blocks away. I packed only what I could carry in a single nondescript bag: essential documents, the cash I'd saved, a burner phone I'd bought weeks before, and a few clothes. Walking out of that apartment, leaving the key on the table, was the most terrifying and, at the same time, the most liberating moment of my entire life. Every shadow seemed to hold him. Every car that passed felt like it was him. The drive to my friend's city is a blur of me constantly looking over my shoulder, my heart just pounding. The very first thing I did when I arrived was change my number and delete all my social media accounts. It was like a digital amputation, painful, but absolutely necessary. I knew this was just step one in trying to get safe. Those first few days after escaping were such a strange mix of relief and intense paranoia. Every time the new burner phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat. I jumped at shadows, completely convinced I'd see his face in every crowd. The emotional toll was immense. I felt broken, like a vase that had been shattered and then poorly glued back together. There was so much confusion, grief for the relationship I thought I'd had, and this profound sense of guilt, even though I knew, deep down, I'd done what I absolutely had to do. Nightmares were frequent, vivid replays of his control, his anger. Practically speaking, I had to rebuild my life from scratch. With my friend's amazing help, I found a small temporary room to rent. I started looking for a new job, using a slightly varied version of my name. I opened a new bank account at a completely different bank. I changed my routines religiously, never taking the same route twice, avoiding places I'd once loved. I learned to live a life that was far more offline than I ever had before. No social media, no public check-ins, absolutely nothing that could give away my new location. There were attempts at contact, of course, emails to my old, now defunct account that my friend would check for me, messages through acquaintances who just didn't understand how serious the situation was. Each attempt was like a fresh wave of fear, a horrible reminder that he hadn't just forgotten, hadn't just moved on. But with each blocked number, each ignored message, I felt a tiny piece of my strength returning. I documented everything, just in case, creating a log of any contact attempts, just like the resources I'd found online advised. It was a slow, incredibly painful process of untangling my life from his. Reclaiming my life hasn't been some final destination. It's a journey, one that's still going on today. The first and most crucial step was therapy. Talking about the whole experience, unpacking all the trauma, the fear, and the manipulation in a safe space was incredibly difficult, but it was absolutely essential. It helped me understand the dynamics of his control, and importantly, to stop blaming myself for what happened. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I found a new job. I made new, cautious friendships. Trusting people again, especially in new relationships, has been one of the biggest hurdles. That instinct to look over my shoulder, to question motives, it still lingers. But it's quieter now. Reclaiming my life, for me, means rediscovering who I was before him, the interests I'd abandoned because they didn't fit into his narrow little world. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with family members he'd managed to drive a wedge between. There are still days when a certain look from someone or a particular tone of voice can trigger a flash of that old fear. But now I have coping mechanisms. I have a support system. Reclaiming life, for me, means living without that constant, suffocating fear. It means making my own choices, big and small, without a voice in my head second guessing them through his filter. It means feeling safe in my own home, in my own skin. It means knowing that I survived, I escaped, and I am so much stronger than I ever thought possible. The scars are there, yeah, but they're a testament to survival, not to defeat. My story is just one of many, and it's a stark reminder of how insidiously control can disguise itself as care, and how quickly admiration can twist into obsession. Escaping was the hardest thing I've ever done, but living under that constant surveillance was like a slow death of the spirit. If any part of this story hits home for you, if you feel those walls closing in, please, please know you are not alone, and it is absolutely not your fault. Recognizing those red flags is the very first step. There is hope, and there's help out there. Reach out to trusted friends, family, or professional organizations. You deserve to feel safe. If this story helped you in any way, or you think it could help someone else, please give it a like and share it. And if you feel comfortable, share a message of support in the comments below. You truly never know who might need to see it. For anyone needing support, resources like the National Domestic Violence Hotline are available, and there are so many local organizations that can help you create a safety plan. Thank you for listening.
For more scary stories, like and subscribe.